Hello and welcome to today's video review of the English 1 Segment 1 Honors Exam Review. You are taking the first step to make sure that you successfully complete the course by reviewing for your exam today. Before we get started, make sure that you take notes of today's video. This is going to be all the material that you will be seeing on your exam, and at any point, pause, rewind, or stop the video to review any material as needed. So for your exam in Segment 1, there are two exams. There is a regular exam and an honors exam. As an honors student, you will only be completing the honors exam. You will also be responsible for the regular portions of the course, which is Units 1, 2, and 3. Your exam, you will have approximately 14 multiple choice questions plus 3 short answers, which is based on Units 1, 2, and 3. And then you will also have 4 extra questions that will cover the honors material. So for the honors section of the exam, we're going to take a look at Romeo and Juliet, the historical context of Romeo and Juliet, different types of genres, diction, difference in language and genres, and comparing and contrasting the structure of a play in another genre. And we will also see figurative language and Shakespeare's use of it in Romeo and Juliet. So let's start by reviewing Romeo and Juliet. So you looked at Acts 1, 2. So we're going to be focusing on the historical context in Romeo and Juliet. And the historical context is the time in which these characters lived. So a couple of examples. While you may be able to relate to many feelings that Romeo, Juliet, and other characters have, you may also notice that their culture is very different from ours today. Relationships between friends, families, and lovers was not the same several hundred years ago as you experience in your lifetime now. So now let's look at the historical context in Romeo and Juliet in relation to marriage and love. For example, Juliet is only 13 years old, and her family feels that she is more than old enough to get married. In addition, her family feels they have the responsibility to choose a husband for Juliet. And both Romeo and Juliet express that they will die without each other. Their feelings of love are intense after meeting only for a few minutes at a party. So looking at these two examples, are these a typical relationship of marriage today? Now let's look at the historical context in Romeo and Juliet with loyalty and friendship. In Romeo and Juliet, we see people are fighting and killing in the streets to show their loyalty to the Capulets or the Montagues. It's not until the prince gets fed up with the bloodshed that he declares there will be punishments for anyone caught fighting. And also in Romeo and Juliet, Romeo's friends take him to a party to cheer him up. Once he meets Juliet, he leaves his friends and doesn't tell them where he's going. Mercutio is offended that Romeo did this, which indicates that it is rude for a young man to choose a girl over his friends. So from these two, are these examples of the laws and values that exist today? So from these couple of examples of historical context, this is what you're going to be using on the exam and comparing and contrasting the time period during Romeo and Juliet's time and today. So let's look at another exam question. From Romeo and Juliet, in a well-developed paragraph, identify the details of this story that reveal information about the time period. How are these details significant from the story? So we have an excerpt from Capulet, who was Juliet's father, and he says, how now, chopped logic, what is this? Proud and I thank you not, and yet not proud. Mistress Minion, you thank me no thankings, nor proud me no prouds, but settle your fine joys against Thursday next, to go with Paris to St. Peter's Church, or I will drag thee on a hurdle thither. Out, you green sickness carrion, out, you baggage, you tallow face, hang thee, young baggage, disobedient wretch. I tell thee what, get thee to church, O Thursday, or never after look me in the face. Speak not, reply not, do not answer me. So in this excerpt, we see that Juliet's father, Capulet, he is enraged because Juliet has refused to marry Paris. And during this time, arranged marriages were a very common thing. And it was an expectation that Juliet, for example, followed her parents' orders. So you will be given a reading excerpt from Romeo and Juliet and be doing the similar thing. Next, we're going to look at the structure of a dramatic play. And a dramatic play is what we would call Romeo and Juliet. So we see that there are 5 acts. We have Act 1, which is our exposition. For the 5 acts, you could think of these as chapters, and each one has a new focus for the character as the story progresses. The first act of a Shakespearean tragedy normally introduces the characters and the central problem. Act 2 is the rising action, and it's the second act of a Shakespearean tragedy where normally it bridges the events from the first act to the third, which is where we see the rising action that leads to an important event in the middle of the play. When we reach Act 3, we will see an important plot point. The third act of a Shakespearean tragedy normally provides a turn of events that pushes characters towards their unhappy ending. Act 4 moves the story closer to its tragic conclusion. The fourth act of a Shakespearean tragedy serves as another bridging connection between the third and fifth acts. This provides the final rising events to reach the climax of the story. Once you reach Act 5, you're at the final scenes of the play. The fifth act of a Shakespearean tragedy moves from the climax to the denouement and conclusion. In Shakespeare's tragedy, this means that the title characters, or the character or characters whose names are in the title, usually will die. So now we've looked at the structure of a dramatic play, and there's also different genres you'll be asked about. The different genres are referring to things such as letters, short stories, novels, poems, dramatic plays, like what we just read through. And something you might be asked are how are the structures different between these genres? And why would one genre be necessarily better than another? Now we're going to move on to diction. Diction refers to an author's word choice. The words an author selects can be very important to the way audiences understands what is going on. So our word bubble up on the screen is from the conversation between Romeo and Juliet when they meet for the first time. We see words like kiss, palm, touch, hands, holy, sweetly, saints. What do you notice about Shakespeare's diction from this word cloud? We see words with very positive connotations. So Shakespeare has used this specific diction to show the relationship in the first meeting between Romeo and Juliet and how it was a positive one. So here's another example from the exam. Our question would be, what is the significance of the diction in the speech from Romeo and Juliet? So we have an excerpt from the prince speaking. Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, profaners of this neighborhood, stand still. Will they not hear? What ho, you men, you beasts, that quench the fire of your pernicious rage, with purple fountains issuing from your veins. On pain of torture from those bloody hands, throw your mistempered weapons to the ground, and hear the sentence of your moved peace. 3 civil brawls, bred of an airy word by thee, O Capulet and Montague, have thrice disturbed the quiet of our streets, and made Verona's ancient citizens cast by their grave beseeming ornaments, to wield old partisans in hands as old, cankered with peace to part your cankered hate. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. So we can see from that excerpt that the prince used a very specific and forceful diction in his speech. So now what is the significance of it? We have 4 questions or 4 answers for you to choose from. So A is the prince's diction indicates there has been too much fighting. The next time this occurs, those who are caught fighting will be executed. Or B, the prince's diction indicates that he sides more with the Capulets than the Montagues. He hopes the Montagues will eventually die. Or C, The prince's diction indicates he sides more with the Montagues than the Capulets. He hopes the Capulets will eventually die. Or D, the prince's diction indicates there has not been enough fighting lately, and the next time the families choose to battle, the prince wants to fight. So take a moment, you can pause the video and decide which is the correct answer. Our correct answer would be A. The prince's diction indicates there has been too much fighting. And we can see this by the highlighted words in red, where we can see his negative connotation. Now we're going to move on to Shakespeare's use of figurative language. Figurative language is used whenever you describe something by comparing it with something else. Our first example is a metaphor. A metaphor is a word or phrase that is used to make a comparison between two unlike things. An example is, your room is a disaster area. Our next example of figurative language is personification. This is a figure of speech in which human characteristics are given to an animal or an object. Our example is, my teddy bear gave me a hug. And our last example of figurative language is a simile. A simile uses the words like or as to compare one object or idea with another to suggest they are alike. Our example is, she is busy as a bee. So in our excerpt, we see a quote from Friar Lawrence from Act 2, and in this we need to identify the personification, simile, and metaphor that is used in this excerpt. So go ahead and pause the video at this time and see if you can identify the correct lines. Alright, so here in this excerpt we can see our very first line in red is an example of personification. We see it giving human characteristics to the mornings by saying it smiles. Our second is our simile in purple, a fleckled darkness like a drunkard reels. We see a comparison by using like or as. And our last example is of a metaphor, where we see in green the earth, that nature's mother is her tomb. Congratulations! We've completed the Segment 1 Honors Exam Review, and what do you need to do now? You can prepare more for your exam by going to your gradebook and reviewing your pre-test from first semester. You will find this in Module 1.00B. You will not be able to retake your pre-test, but you will be able to see all the sample questions to practice with. And again, when you go to take your exam, make sure you are taking the correct one. Regular students will only be taking the regular exam, whereas honor students will be taking the S1.08 segment exam honors. This will include both information from the regular portion of the class and the honors unit. So now you are ready for your exam, and what do you need to do now? Make sure that you have submitted all your assignments from Segment 1, and this does include your collaboration. Study your exam review handout and any first semester material. Contact your instructor for the exam password, and now you are ready to take the exam and do a fantastic job. And congratulations, you have completed the review video. At this point, if you have any further questions, please contact your instructor.